These little hand-sculpted bluebirds are the centerpiece of today's project. In today's episode of Thermal Mermaid, we're making summer bluebirds nested in the trees, and I'm going to take you through this project so that you can do it yourself at home if you want to. Now today's project is just a bit of a more advanced craft, and it assumes that you know how to make your standard cold process soap. And if you're interested in learning how to do that, then come on and join us over at thermalmermaid.com and you can find a full course on how to do this. Now, for those of you who are already soap makers, you can use your standard base recipe and your favorite soap dough recipe. Now you may already know my favorite soap dough recipe, which I have listed over in lesson 6.2 in the members section in the Thermal Mermaid Learning Library. And if you want this entire recipe from beginning to end, you can also find it listed under bluebirds in the cold process section of the members directory. And for those of you who already have your favorite recipes ready to go, then you can follow along and I'll show you how to put this together for your craft tables. For this demonstration, I'm going to take out my soap dough. I'm starting with a pound of soap, and it ends up taking about a third of this to make 30 of these little birds. Now this dough, it's about a few days old, and I'm going to work with it into soft little balls with my fingers and roughly shape these into little Twitter bird shapes. Now the birds themselves are three parts. This center body, and then I'll add two little wings on each side. The color I'm using to get this robin's egg blue is Siren's Song from Nurture Soap. Now notice here while we're working with it that the color is almost a seafoam green, but when this cures after a few days, it will morph into a nice light robin's egg blue. So that's why I've chosen it for my little birds. Now I realize a lot of you guys out there are just natural artists. It doesn't matter what you touch, it's going to look incredible no matter what you do. I, on the other hand, like a lot of other people, am not so much like that. Instead of trying to make every little bird perfectly, I'm just going to start making the shape that I want, and then each one will get better as I go along. You can always go back and you can smooth them out after they've had a few minutes to firm up, and then you can get them perfectly into the shape that you want. But if I try to make everyone perfect exactly in the moment, I'll be here forever. And making 30 of these little guys already is going to take about an hour and a half to 2 hours of my time. Now, once I have a set of little bird bodies with their little wings made, I'm just going to take a bit of black soap dough that I've already made with the black mica, and I'm going to make some eyes and a mouth, and then we'll sculpt these into their little faces, and we'll set these guys aside to dry. And if this is your first time here and you've just discovered us, then welcome to the Thermal Mermaid family. Here you'll find videos on making soap making crafts, including full tutorials, and there are plenty of free recipes posted, especially if you're just starting to learn artisan soap making. So be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can get the latest craft projects that we're making here at Thermal Mermaid, and make sure to click that bell icon to be notified when a new project is published so you can be the first to tell us what you think about it. Here I have my lye water solution and the base oils already made. Now the main bar of soap is going to be in the image of a tree that our little birds will sit on, and in order to make this image, I'm going to control where I put the soap in the mold by spooning it in. So I want to work with this at a pretty thick trace. But this isn't a trace that's accelerating quickly. I have complete control over the trace, but what we're going to do here is I'm working with very heavy oils that I already know will give me a custard texture while I'm working with it at room temperature. So we're going to make this batter nice and thick, but we're not doing things to accelerate the trace. I'm actually using quite a bit of water, and I'm working with it at room temperature. So we're going to keep the acceleration to a moderate stage while we're working with oils that will already give us the texture we want. Once I have my fragrance oil added, we're going to mix this up We're going to let it thicken up, and then we're going to separate it out into our colors. Now that the base is made, I'm going to remove about a pound of soap, maybe a little bit more, and this is going to be the tree top, which will pipe on the top. So I'm going to blend this down with my favorite nature green color, which in this case is soapberry green. Now this one is another morphing mica. It looks very plant-based at first, and then it turns into an ugly army green after a few hours, and then within a day to 2 days, it becomes a nice true green, perfect for our tree tops. Now since I'm piping the tree tops, I'm going to hurry up and get this blended down, and then I'm going to transfer this over into my piping bag, and we're going to leave it alone and let it set up while we're working with our other colors. The rest of the batter will be split into 2 parts. And what we'll do is we'll color one part with pre-made titanium dioxide and the other part with a brown matte oxide. Now as I'm pouring this, notice that I'm being a bit too generous with the titanium dioxide and the water mixture. Now there isn't even a pound of soap there in the white cup, and I've used already 35% water in the recipe, so if you do want to control any glycerin rivers, this is where you want to do that. For instance, you don't need to see actual white batter for the soap to become a nice bright shade of white. Oftentimes it's going to cure lighter than what you see with the batter that you're working with. So if you do want to control the glycerin rivers, then this is where you want to pay attention to that. However, I like the glycerin rivers for these freehand type projects. I really never figured out why some people don't like it, because to me it looks more wild and each bar looks unique. But if you are one of those who do want everything to be absolutely perfect to the best of your control, then that's where we're going to pay attention to that little detail. Over here on the left, I've added my brown pigment. Now this is an oxide, and oxides tend to be much stronger than when we're used to working with micas, so I only put 1/8 of a teaspoon in here, and in a moment you're going to quickly see just how powerful this nice light brown color will be. Before we start filling the molds, I'm going to set just a bit of the brown soap aside for decoration, so we'll pour just a few tablespoons here into this piping bag. Now for the brown and white soap, I'm just going to layer this into the mold, and it's going to create the shape of a tree trunk. Now this isn't too difficult. First, you see here I'm going to pour the bottom of the tree. Now this here isn't exactly the texture I want. It looks kind of like chocolate pudding here, but I want this to be thick, like a heavy yogurt, so I can use the spoon to control the soap. So I am going to give this just a few more minutes to set up so that it'll get to the texture that I want, and then we'll start spooning it into the mold in the shape of a tree. Now just above the ground, right here on the brown layer, I'll add a bit of green grass, and then the trunk will follow up the center. Eventually it'll lean to one side or the other. Now I want this to look rather uneven and wild. Otherwise I would just set cardboard dividers inside the mold and then pour the brown in the center and then the whites on the side. But spooning it in this way will give it a more natural and an asymmetrical look. So it'll look more like a tree. Now once I've finished layering the brown and white, it's time to bundle up that green piping bag that we set aside and pipe the top of our tree. Starting at the lowest area first, I'm just going to fill in the green and sculpt it into the shape of a treetop. And the more uneven this layer is, the better the tree looks. Remember when we set aside a few tablespoons of brown soap? Well, that's ready to be piped on the top. In 1-inch spaces, which I have marked off as you can see, I'm going to use a small circle piping tip and draw little brown birds' nests right across the top of my trees. And now it's time to add each of the little sculpted birds on top to tend to their nests. Of course, we have to give them something to tend to, so each of the little mama birds gets 3 little baby eggs to look after. Once we have all our little birds in place, there's nothing left to do but set this aside and come back tomorrow for the cutting. And after 24 hours, we're ready for the reveal so you can see how our little nested birds are sitting in their treetops. Now I've carefully lined these up, and now you can see what they look like on the inside. And here we have our little summer bluebirds sitting in their treetops. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Thermal Mermaid. Remember, if you would like the printable instructions along with the full recipe and the soap dough recipe, you can come on over and join us in the Learning Library and become a member for just a couple of dollars. It has full access to hundreds of soap craft recipes. And don't forget, Come on over and join us in the Facebook group to interact with thousands of other soapers who are all working on their art projects and small businesses. If you have any questions about anything that you're working on, then feel free to start a thread or just jump in for any reason. You can find the links at the bottom of this video. And until next time, happy soaping!